Hi everyone, my name is Paige and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is my booktube channel where I talk about the books that I'm reading, the books that I'm going to read, the books that I have read, and today we're going to be talking about the books that I have read, or at least tried to read in the month of April. If you watched my judging books based on their covers video, which you can find right here, you would have seen me select and purchase these 4 books online. And those books were Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid, Flight Behavior by Barbara Kingsolver, and Commonwealth by Ann Patchett. If you counted along with me, you would have seen 4 books in my hand. However, I did only read 3. And a bunch of other books I listened to. Those are memoirs, but I'll be doing another video, which will be coming out shortly, about those memoirs. So I'm not including those in my monthly reading video. And the one book that I didn't read was the one I was most excited for, so I saved it to the end. Like a child, saving best for last. I didn't read Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. I mean, I didn't read it. In April, I got to page 35 and it was so good. This book I'm so excited to read. I'm gonna tack it on if I can, if I have time, on the end of my May reading list. I'm sure I will, but I didn't get to this book because I got stuck on 2 books this month, and I was so disappointed to not get to this book. But I don't DNF books very often, and I'm trying not to. I'm trying to give books a fair chance in this renewed reading journey that I'm on, trying to give all the books I read a fair chance, especially if they're out of my comfort zone. So let's get into the reviews of the 3 books that I did read from my April TBR. This was a long reading month. So I feel like it was a year ago that I read Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. These are spoiler-free reviews, although all 3 of these books really didn't have much plot to them. This one had the most plot of all 3 of the books. It's spoiler-free, nonetheless. This book was originally published in 1937, and it touches on some very serious topics, some very historically significant themes. I'd never read anything by her, and I don't know how. I don't know how I have not happened upon a Zora Neale Hurston novel or short story until now, and I have missed this in my life. This book is considered by many to be a classic, and I think it has definitely earned that designation. And I can't even really explain it. I'm just gonna go into my review, which isn't really a review. This book was really difficult for me to review and give a rating to. And I know I don't have to give books ratings, but I think for my own reading and learning purposes, I like to give a book a rating and force myself to justify that rating. In this book, we follow the story of Janie, a Black woman who grew up in a white household and is only pressured to leave home when she is caught kissing a random boy outside her home by her grandmother. And her grandmother says, well, now you have to marry this other man for some reason, unbeknownst to Janie, because she's 13, 14 years old. It's set in 1930s Florida, and it is as much a community study of Black-only communities that started popping up in the United States around that time as it is a character study of a woman who feels and is othered within those communities. Janie moves through her life trying to find happiness and romantic love and belonging in a more greater sense, while trying to find a balance between the two. There are years that ask questions and years that answer. Janie had no chance to know things, so she had to ask. Did marriage end the cosmic loneliness of the unmated? Did marriage compel love like the sun, the day? There were sections of this book that were beautiful, heart-wrenching, compelling, but honestly challenging. Oh, to be a pear tree, any tree in bloom, with kissing bees singing at the beginning of the world. She was 16. She had glossy leaves and bursting buds, and she wanted to struggle with life. But it seemed to elude her. Where were the singing bees for her? Nothing on the place nor in her grandma's house answered her. She searched as much of the world as she could from the top of the front step, and then went on down to the front gate and leaned over to gaze up and down the road. looking, waiting, breathing short and impatience, waiting for the world to be made. But there's also a lot of dialogue in this book that I found challenging to read. It's heavily accented and dialectic, and it's written phonetically, as you would expect a book like this or any book that's written in an English dialect or English accented text needs to be, but it becomes dense. But the dialogue was important, the accents are important, the people in this book are important to hear, and that dialogue paired with the beautiful prose and a very distinct Hurston style just made this book a pleasure to read. Janie stood where he left her for unmeasured time and thought. She stood there until something fell off the shelf inside her. Then she went inside there to see what it was. It was her image of Jody, tumbled down and shattered. But looking at it, she saw that it never was the flesh and blood figure of her dreams. Every page has a memorable line, something that struck a chord. This book came pre-annotated by two separate people, and they were obviously like in high school reading this in the States and didn't see the beauty in it and made fun of sections of it. And that kind of just made me appreciate it more, nearly brought to tears by not only the content, but the writing. I don't know, I'm gushing about this book. I didn't give it a 5-star, but you'll see. Zora Neale Hurston writes as a passionate anthropologist, and so I would recommend this to anybody who's looking to read something historical fiction. It's not really historical fiction because it was written in the time, but it reads as if it could have been written now. She captures what you may want to read about the Black experience in the southern United States in the 1930s, and I gave this 4 stars on Goodreads because it wasn't consistently well written all the way through. Most of the prose is beautiful, the dialogue is important, and it feels like these people are so real that you could touch them. But there were parts in this book that I felt were overwritten, underwritten, underdeveloped, overdeveloped. I can't even entirely put my finger on it because I don't feel like I am the person to put my finger on it. But I think it is well worth the read, which is why I gave it 4 stars, even though I couldn't genuinely give it a true rating. I just think it's worth reading. So worth reading, 4 stars. Please read Zora Neale Hurston if you haven't already. Maybe I'm the last person in the world to not have read her. The second book that I read this month was Commonwealth by Ann Patchett. This is a family saga about a blended family whose children split their time between Los Angeles and Virginia. The father of one set of children is a police officer and the other father is a lawyer. The police officer is gorgeous, beautiful, oh my goodness, they talk about it so much. Wife leaves him for the lawyer, and we follow the children's stories from there. Most of the story takes place when the children are adults, and we see how time has taken its toll on them and their parents. We visit each of them individually as well as their parents while they're with their children, and there's oranges on the cover. Although this was a mostly vibes book, there were 3 distinct twists, and I did enjoy the plot aspects of this story, but that wasn't Patchett's focus at all. It's a character-driven book that jumps around a lot in its chronology. Unfortunately, the character building was not consistent, and there were lots of details and concepts and little bits that ended up not being tied up and just ended up being mentioned and then just dropped as loose ends. Specifically, some character traits of the children when they're younger that you think will be reflected on when they get older and just aren't. And there's some very dated language used in this book that is ableist, fatphobic, racist, just language you wouldn't expect to see in a book from 2016. Yeah, it could have been completely omitted and nothing would have changed in the book other than like my negative perception of Ann Patchett's publisher or her editor. Like I didn't understand why some of that language is in there. This book had so much potential. The plot that it did have was interesting and the characters could have been fleshed out so much better. and just some of that extra garbage that was in here could have just been tossed to the side. This had all the potential, thinking back on it, to be one of my favorite books just because of her writing style and the content of this book. Like, but looking back on it, honestly, it's really disappointing. I gave it 3.2 stars, but honestly, it wasn't unreadable, so it's hard to give it anything less than a 3, but like 2.75, 2.5, like this, I wanted to bang this book against my head because it was a missed opportunity. The last book, unfortunately, that I read and actually had to partially listen to was Barbara Kingsolver's Flight Behavior. And I think I would like Barbara Kingsolver. Like, some of the passages in this book were lovely to read, and her dialogue was really fun and believable in a lot of cases, but this just hit poorly. Like, I was so disappointed. The plot, the setting, the characters, what? And there wasn't a lot I liked about this book. Very much at all. But I can sense that I may like her. Also, the pacing. The pacing in this book was all over the place. I was baffled by how slow some of the sections were and how quickly I rolled through some other sections when I was like, whoa, cool, right on, great, something is happening, and then nothing. So this book is about a young mother living in rural United States. I can't remember where, to be honest. It felt like so long ago. She happens upon a natural phenomenon when she climbs a mountain to try to cheat on her husband, and everything changes. People think she's like this religious icon, and she's on the news, and just like a bunch of stuff happens. No spoilies. The whole first third of this book hinges on no one in this rural community knowing what a monarch butterfly is. And I genuinely couldn't tell if that was realistic or not. I asked a few people, Googled a few things, and I just don't see that. I got over that. It was a hurdle that I recovered from, and I just got bored. The rest of this book's narrative centers around Hicks be hickin' and scientists be sciencing, and sometimes Hicks be sciencing. Isn't that groundbreaking? I don't have a whole lot more to say about this. I read the middle part of this book as an audiobook, and it was narrated by Barbara Kingsolver, which I was like, great, this is gonna be cool. But it just tainted this book even more for me because she does a horrible Jamaican accent for one of the main characters, and unlike rural populations not knowing what a butterfly is, I could not recover from that. So take from that what you will, and I gave this book 2.5 stars. So that was my month. I made it through 3 books. One I enjoyed, one I was fine with but disappointed in, and one I was like baffled by. I think I'll still read Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, but this book is, I don't know what I'm gonna do with this because I don't think other people should read this book. Maybe they should. It's not that bad. Just don't listen to the audiobook. Like, people seem to love that audiobook, but I was like, no. And I really am sad that I didn't get to read this because these 2 books took me so long. Anyway, check out my last video, which was me reading for 30 minutes in a coffee shop, or any of my other videos on my channel. So please subscribe, like this video. Thank you for joining me on my renewed book journey, and catch you on the next one. Thanks, bye!